time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Star Wars has just released information about the first game set in the High Republic era. It's called Star Wars Eclipse, and we're going to take a very in-depth look at the trailer that they released this past week, as well as the new teaser trailer from the Book of Boba Fett, almost 2 weeks from release. And not to mention our third subject on the menu today, all about the Bogan Collection. Did you know the Jedi have a secret a vault of Sith artifacts hidden in the Jedi Temple? I bet you didn't. And if you did, you can hear more about it right here on Star Wars Escape Pod. So let's get into it. I'm your host, Josh. We got Blake, our co-host, joining us for the ride today. Let's go.
Another happy landing.
Left for dead on the sands of Tatooine. I am Boba Fett.
Streaming on Disney Plus soon. I mean, a lot of people looking forward to this show. And welcome back to our show, Mr. Blake.
Hey, yes, an exciting time. We're only weeks away from Boba Fett hitting home screens across the planet.
Home screen, yeah. Coming to home video.
That's right. Skipping the theater straight to your home on, well, probably not Blu-ray DVD, but Disney Plus for only $12 a month.
You remember the age and era? Well, I guess they still kind of do it here and there, but the era of home video, straight to home video releases, you know, like those TV home videos.
All the Disney sequel movies.
yeah, all the Disney sequel movies and like the Barbie movies and
we got Lilo and Stitch like 4.5 or whatever it was.
Direct release.
They didn't even put out a trailer. They didn't want people to know. You just like stumble onto the DVD case in like HMV or Walmart.
Oh yeah, it was one of those. I guess I don't know if they saved money doing that or what, but I mean, this day and age, doing all these streaming services on Disney. I mean, Disney's killing it with all the Marvel and Disney stuff. Like,
it's true.
They've had more series this year than movies, I think.
I think they realized. Well, I feel like it's become part of the plan because I think Bob Iger realized like everything is heading towards the streaming like direction, and they didn't have any content to just like really pull people towards their platform instead of like other platforms. So he kind of just went full force into that.
Right.
And The Mandalorian was really, I think, the one that proved to them that this was like the direction that they should go.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, it's a weird time, the streaming wars, I guess we could call it. And it's gonna be one of those things like phones, right? Like it's some of these streaming services might just, maybe they'll die. I don't know. Like there's no way that people can afford. Yeah, they'll get bought out by another company or whatever, or maybe some like a company like Disney comes along, they buy 20th Century Fox, they absorb all their content, this and that. It's gonna all kind of merge. If you got so many out there, like
a good example up here in Canada, at least, is that we don't have HBO Max. So if you get Crave, there's a deal with HBO Max that their content goes on a Crave. So it'll probably be
exactly.
I would think.
Yeah, and then a new one will come along. Like for a while, a lot of Paramount stuff was split across Netflix and Crave and whatever else that was like kind of a third party thing, and now they've got their own. Now they've got Paramount Plus.
Yeah, which is what Disney did too, right? Same thing.
Yeah, same exact deal. So it's kind of nuts to think about. It's a little overwhelming, and it's gonna head back to. I mean, it's already going back to the way things were, where it's like no one can possibly. Like unless it's like your thing to pay for all of these streaming services, there's no way anyone, or most people at least, would not pay for all of these things. And there might be just one show that you want to watch on another platform, and then you just download it, right? Like it's just one of those things. Like that's the reality, right? Because like that's what people did with cable television. Like it's like, oh yeah, I'm paying for like 100 channels. Then boom, there's the one channel where it's got the one show.
Yeah, you're like, can I get this one channel? Like, well, that's only a part of this package, and you got to pay an extra $25 a month, and the other 4 channels are all garbage that you'll never watch. Yeah, it's ridiculous,
right? So then you find a site like Couch Tuner or something.
Yeah,
like that,
mine for me was I always wanted like what was it, like GTV Tech, I think. Like that was, I can't, it's been so long, but like if you got that channel that had all the video game review shows, right? So you can watch like X Play and reviews on the run, whatever they were all called back in the day. Right. But like that's the one I wanted, because then I know which games I wanted to buy.
Yeah, but exactly.
Then you had to, I think it was paired with Spike, which wasn't too bad, but then all the other channels are just useless.
Yeah, and it's heading back to that direction with all the content available. But the brilliant thing about Disney Plus is there's so much good stuff coming out, like good original content. It's definitely at the top of the list for being like, you should subscribe to this, and for that somewhat low fee, you're actually getting your money's worth. Whereas like something like Apple Plus is like just kind of garbage. Like they've got like 1 or 2 shows, like boom, watch, done. Like maybe you bought it for a month, and that you don't need to even bother subscribing for another like 6 months until something new comes out.
Yeah. Like I think their deal is if you buy an Apple product, then you like get it for a year.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. Just to try and hook people in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like it is much cheaper, mind you. It's like $5 or something compared to like most of the other competitors, which is like 12 or 15 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. But, the interesting one to me is Amazon Prime, because you get all these shows, but most people are only paying for it for free shipping, because then they save money anyway. So you guys just like get free television along with free shipping, which is what
true.
You're really
they got some good
for.
stuff on there. They got some really good stuff on there.
Just Top Gear. That's all I really watch.
They got the Wheel of Time happening right now. They've got a bunch of stuff. Next year they'll have the Lord of the Rings. I shouldn't call it that. I should call it the Middle Earth show. Whatever they're gonna call it. The Second Age show.
No one will know what it is if they call it that.
Yeah,
is that when it takes place in the Second Age?
Yeah, that's when it's taking place. Yeah,
and if I'm not mistaken, that's the age before the movies.
Yeah, it's like thousands of years before the films take place. Yeah, so but it's set in the same continuity, which is cool. So anyway, any Lord of the Rings fans out there are going to be very happy.
Well, it always starts out like that, and then what really happens is they just destroy all of the lore, and then they make the movies feel worthless.
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, I've been busy watching Hawkeye on Disney Plus, and it's been good. It's been getting my money's worth, and then Book of Boba comes out in 2 weeks. When Hawkeye wraps up, it's like one show ends, the next begins. Mm-hmm. You're always just getting something out of it, so I'm stoked.
Doesn't that one lead up to Christmas?
Hawkeye?
Yeah, I think I heard it's almost like a Christmas movie.
Yeah, it's a Christmas season inspired show. Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's worth keeping up with those Marvel shows. They're all gonna hook right into this new phase of films coming out. So it's good. It's a good deal. But
because who are they leading up to now? Like Galactic or something?
Oh, Galactus I think Fantastic Four is around the corner eventually, but I don't even know. Like they're going with the whole multiverse thing, and Loki did a bunch of stuff to introduce us to a big villain that's going to pop up later down the road and all that. So it's hard to say. They're going kind of nuts with all the different stuff that they can do now, but Yeah, I mean, in 2 weeks when we get Boba Fett, I mean, actually, we just heard that sizzle reel, and if anyone hasn't seen The Return for the Book of Boba Fett, it's got some new clips in there, some new footage. And did you notice anything?
I'm Boba Fett.
Boba Fett. You notice anything new about that teaser trailer?
Something that I kind of missed the first time through, but you pointed out, was him putting on the armor was actually pretty sweet. We've never seen that done before, and
that was pretty cool. Yeah,
the fabric underneath for the torso piece is actually surprisingly loose. Like maybe it's just like a leather jacket almost. I always thought that'd be stiffer, and then the wrist thing you saw like snaps on.
Yeah, exactly. So the wrist gauntlets just kind of mechanically clamp into place instead of, I guess, I don't know how I thought that they attached to his wrist this entire time. Maybe just Velcro, or maybe it hinges open and hinges closed like a clamp or something. But to see it have like automatic buckles, it's like it kind of modernizes the suit that's been around for so long already. Like it modernizes it a bit. Yeah,
because like medieval armor, it worked the same way, but it was like leather straps or like ties, right? You'd have to tie it by hand. Yeah. Whereas like, now it's a long time ago, but it's still kind of the future. So it's like everything's automated.
I got this trailer open right now on my screen. I'm just clicking through it. And, it starts off with Boba in his Tusken Raider kind of suit with his robes and his gaffy stick or Gaddafi stick or whatever you want to call it. Looking over at Jabba's palace, and I guess are those the main doors, or is that the doors to the like the garage?
That's a good question, because didn't we find out that? No, where was it? Where did Hondo stash the Slave One? Because didn't we like have to break in somewhere in Tatooine to get it?
Oh, Hondo owned it on Florum, but Boba Fett got possession of it again. Towards the end of the Clone Wars, obviously, because he has it in Empire Strikes Back. So
they're different places then. So
this I'm assuming is kind of after he gets out of the Sarlacc pit, gets saved by Tusken Raiders, and he's kind of gone back for a ship. Maybe this is after he meets Fennec Shand in the desert or something, and he's going back for Slave One for the first time in years. Right. So it could be something like that, but that's just my theory. It's a bit of a suspicious clip, him sneaking up on Jabba's palace like that.
It's strange though. Why would he then sneak in, steal the Slave One, leave, come back, and then kill Bib Fortuna?
I don't know. I'm kind of wondering that too. But of course, they I don't know who it was, but they made a public statement. This show is going to fill in a lot of gaps, like a lot of holes, which is really good because there's a fair few of them at this point.
Yeah.
So that I find a very interesting clip. And, timeline wise, I feel like that's before his appearance in Mando when he goes to get his armor. It's where he's got the robe on with the stick on his back and the cycler rifle. So, and then it goes into the next sequence where he's in a Bacta tank. And I assume that this is like the present time when the show takes place, because it looks like the scars on his skin are significantly reduced than they were in Mandalorian season 2.
That's what I was wondering too, because it does seem reduced. And so I guess I was unaware of this, but I guess Bacta also heals scar tissue, not just current wounds, because I thought it was just fresh wounds.
Yeah, I think it also heals. It would kind of make sense because we see Vader using a Bacta tank in Rogue One, and that's like 20 years, almost 20 years after. That's 19 years after his incident on Mustafar, right? So
okay, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it just also brings some pain relief as well. It's like Tylenol for your skin.
I feel like his scars didn't heal back as well as Boba's did.
Definitely not. Although maybe Boba's just wasn't as bad to begin with, but
could be that.
It's kind of a neat little thing because so it goes into the shot where he's suiting up, where we're just talking about the vest opening up and the gauntlets and all that. And when he puts on the helmet, his face looks unscathed almost. Like he's got some scars, but like not nearly like the big patches that he had in season 2 of Mandalorian.
That's true.
It's significantly gone. Yeah.
I kind of like that. I like the scars. I like the seeing that Boba went through like the Sarlacc and like leaves this lasting imprint on him. The cynical side of me says, oh, they just didn't want to do the makeup all the time because it takes too long.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
And maybe we don't know even if Tamara Morrison himself asked if they could reduce it so he doesn't have to sit there for 4 hours a day to do it.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, like, Bacta is a good solution. Like, I don't know if they've ever confirmed like how good Bacta can get as far as curing scar tissue. But, if that was kind of an out of universe reason for them to be like, the makeup's going to take too long, let's just kind of get rid of that reason. And maybe we'll do a few scars, but like kind of make it better so it doesn't take as many hours per day to put on them. I could totally see them just saying, screw it. Let's just put him in a Bacta tank. He heals himself. While he's in there, he's dreaming of all these flashback scenes of like how he got there in the first place.
Right.
So yeah, I could totally see that happening.
Fair enough.
We see a lot of footage that we've seen in other teasers, but sorry, what were you saying?
I was going to say, then it just makes it feel bad then for people like the guy who plays Vision, because he's got to sit there and get all that stuff put on like every time.
Yeah, totally. I'm looking at this other shot here with all those criminals sitting around the table. There's some new footage there that we haven't seen before, and there's some new angles. What's interesting is there's a server droid there who's the same server droid style as the one who's in the I think it's on either on Jabba's sail barge or down in the prison area, but I recognize that droid. He's got like red eyes and he looks like human almost. He's got like a nose and a mouth and everything.
He kind of looks like the torture droid from Jabba's palace, but painted
that's
white.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that might be what I'm thinking of. But yeah, familiar looking, very Star Warsy looking.
Yeah, just junky.
Right, yeah, junky.
It's that classic junk droid look.
Yeah, totally. And that's at 38 seconds in the return teaser. The Gamorrean guards looking a lot thinner than they normally do.
That stood out to me too. They lost a lot of weight, I guess.
They haven't been feeding properly.
Yeah, Big Fortuna was taking the bigger cut of food for himself.
Yeah, totally. And then we have this is a shot that you pointed out. We have like the chopper gang, all the Niktos flying their sporty looking speeder bikes across the desert of Tatooine. And
yeah, it looks like they're all Nikto. So I think it's an entire gang of Niktos.
Yeah.
Which in The Mandalorian, the first season, I think he might fight maybe a similar gang or the same one, because I believe they're mostly Niktos as well from in the first episode.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of wondering about that myself. You mentioned the design on these speeder bikes also have like a striped pattern on it. I noticed the one behind the one in the front also kind of has that same look. Okay. So I think that design is kind of reflecting of their like what kind of gang they're on. Yeah. They also all have the exact same bike.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Or very similar models. Like they got like two between all of them.
Maybe even not even that. They look super similar. Maybe they got them in bulk for a discount. I love their clothing though. It looks very Mad Max.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, very like biker style.
Leather jackets.
Yeah, big boots and everything. Yeah,
that'll be cool. I'm excited to see what they do with that scene.
They also got a scene where these Niktos are wrestling around with some what looks like just some captives, like some human beings, and the shadow on the wall is Boba with the gaffy stick on his back, and he walks into the room and he's wearing this like charred, chewed up white tunic thing, which looks like
that's under his armor, isn't it?
It looks like it was. It looks like it was what he used to wear beneath his armor. Like and then it looks like the flight suit thing, and it looks like all the armor pieces are like torn off and burn marks or something like that on there,
all singed.
Yeah. So I wonder if this is maybe also a flashback scene in which kind of fills in a little bit more of how he kind of got back on his feet.
I'm guessing all the scenes when he's got the gaffy stick are going to be flashbacks.
Probably for sure. the follow-up scene to that is kind of what looks like a speeder bike chase, but it looks like there's a bunch of what you called them as Star Wars Vespas.
They're just Vespas, and that blue one looks just exactly like a Vespa. So maybe this scene, it's not a chase, it's just traffic in Spain.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I got some more shots of Fennec and a red Twi'lek and some guys.
I wanted to take a minute to point out the pit droid, because I think that's really awesome. Threw the pit droid in and the collapse, and then he drives into it and like shoots it off camera.
It's a good call. Yeah, it's good seeing the pit droid again.
Yeah, we did see them come back in one of the Mandalorian episodes.
Right. Yeah.
But,
the mechanic lady with
that's right.
The docking bay for rent had she had a few of them.
In the prequels, we were kind of led to believe that these droids are all over because they're probably like the cheapest mechanics you could get, right?
Yep.
So I'm glad to see that we're starting to see them more often.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to see them come back again. It makes me wonder who this red Twi'lek guy is. It looks like he's kind of bowing to whoever's on the throne, which I imagine is probably Boba at this point in time. Someone who represents one of the crime organizations, perhaps. And then that's Boba and Fennec looking down into the Rancor pit as their throne slides forward and backward, like, you know, when the trap door kind of thing. So it makes me wonder if maybe Boba put a new creature down there on his new rulership or whatever.
Or there's just a rotting Rancor corpse that's been there for 10 years.
yeah, exactly. Maybe it's just trapping people down there and just being like, yeah, you can just chill down there. Can't get out. We'll starve you to death.
Yeah, just plug the exit. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new shots in there.
Yeah, lots of cool stuff in there, which is pretty cool.
Definitely leaves me with some questions to see the show, like where they're going to go. I would say what they showed us felt like early shots from early in the season. I wouldn't think more than the second episode in, maybe third at most. To me, it felt like it was all stuff that would be kind of building up. But we still don't have much of a lead of what the main story is going to be driving towards.
That's true. And you know, I guess this goes back to a lot of conversation we've had about speculating on how this show is going to fit in with the other shows. And you know, there's a lot of potential for it to kind of explain a lot more of the underworld that's going to be mixed up in kind of the later plot. On the other hand, it could just be its own independent thing that we just, you know, it's a cool show about Boba Fett and that's it, right? So I believe the episode count for the show has been confirmed at this point, and I think it was 7 episodes. I think.
Interesting. Strange that it's an odd number.
Yeah, let me just double check this. Yeah, 7 episodes. So each episode, I believe, I don't know. I mean, seeing as The Mandalorian had 10, and each episode was roughly between 36 to 50 minutes, or 50 something minutes, I think it was. My guess is each of these episodes is going to be a solid hour. If it's not a solid hour per episode, I will be very surprised, because compared to the normal 10 episode seasons that we've been getting so far from Mando, you know, this is, I think, has it been 10 episodes per season? Or has it been 8? I think it's 8, actually.
I'm actually not even sure. I know the time codes have all been between 30 minutes and like 50 minutes.
Oh, you know what? I take it back. Yeah, it's 8 episodes per season. So this show is 1 episode short of making the 8 episode norm that we have been getting so far. So there's 16 episodes or 16 chapters, I guess we should call it, in Mandalorian, 8 per season. And this is the first show that they've done for Star Wars that has had 7. So we're 1 episode short. So I'm assuming each episode means it'll be like a little longer, probably done intentionally. So
okay, interesting.
That's kind of
I would guess that the main reason is they just didn't have. The story just didn't need an extra episode, and they didn't want to make a filler for the sake of making a filler.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah.
Because like you can always sneak one in. Like, for example, the episode with the spiders in season 2 of Mandalorian, that one always felt very fillery to me.
Yeah, very. Yeah. It's just like they could have filled it with something more I don't know, a little more substance, I guess. But
Yeah, or something that would lead into more story later.
yeah, not to diss anyone that's their favorite episode, but it's true. Like in the overarching plot of season 2, like the events of that episode could have been totally fast
You
tracked.
could skip that episode and it wouldn't really be relevant. I mean, you could argue that it did kind of introduce the characters that were then going to become the Rangers of the New Republic, right?
Yeah.
And with oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name now, but
Who is this you're talking about?
the sheriff lady.
Oh, yeah. Gina Carano's character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you could argue that that was like a lead in to meet them to then affect Gina Carano's character to then like go on. But now
Rangers is canceled.
Yeah, now it's kind of gone nowhere. So
yeah. It was cool to see Dave in an X-wing suit and
that's true.
And all that and Paul and yeah, that was pretty sweet. But yeah, I agree. Like that episode was really fillery.
Like you could skip that episode and you wouldn't have missed anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, Book of Boba, it's around the corner. We're about 2 weeks away now, so we're all very excited. By the time this episode drops on the podcast, we'll be 16 days away from the first episode premiering on Disney Plus. So, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Now we had some massive news drop on Star Wars just out of the blue, like just online boom. It just some random I think when was it? It was like 6 something or 7 something in the evening when this trailer dropped.
That's such an odd time.
And
is that Western time, PST?
Well, I would imagine so. I think the time is converted for it was December 9th. So this was a couple days now on a Thursday. And I think it was sometime in the evening, I'm pretty sure, or just kind of like mid-afternoon, like 4:30 or something. It was some weird time for it to drop. But they dropped a new cinematic game trailer for a game that's called Star Wars Eclipse. And I don't know if you want to bring up the trailer on your end, but we're just going to take a listen on the show, and let's just talk about it in just a minute. Well, the first thing I gotta say about that trailer is probably one of the coolest cinematics that I've seen in a long time. I mean, I still rewatch those old Republic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and ironically enough, they've re-released all of them in 4K, which is insane because I've got this 4K projector at my place, and putting them up on the big wall in 130 or 150 inches it's like it's so crisp and it's fantastic. Like seeing those again. So yeah, seeing this was just like I was getting massive Dune vibes from that trailer.
Okay.
Dune, yeah. Like especially at the very end with that guy coming out of the black goo, and we'll get into that in just a sec. But your initial reaction to this trailer, like what'd you think? Like right away, like
it's interesting because at first I was like, is this Star Wars? You start to see some of the characters a bit. You're like, okay. And I didn't realize it was Old Republic because when we saw the Trade Federation donut ships, I thought this was going to be a prequel era game.
Right.
And then we saw, or like just before the prequel movies, right? Like very close to that.
Yeah.
And then they showed like the Voldemort people. So I was like, oh.
Who are they?
Yeah. Where they get all those Voldemorts.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I think it could be really cool, but I will say after talking to Bryce, we could get into what he said. My excitement did dip a bit. That's just because the style of game that's it's expected to be. Because at first I thought it looked like it'd be an MMO because they were showing all these different characters and stuff, especially the droid. The way they introduced the droid to me felt like this was like an introduction to an MMO style game.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way when you watch the trailer. It's a very vast environment and all these characters and everything like that. And by the way, the official website for this game is up. It's www.starwarseclipse.com, and there is a promotional fan kit on that webpage where you can download social media banners and avatars and desktop wallpapers and phone wallpapers and all that, which is kind of neat. So they're really pushing hard at promoting this game. But some of these shots in the trailer are just so nice looking. Like they've got a really, really cool, I don't know, just a really beautiful looking cinematic going on. I'm sure the game's going to look nothing like that, but if it's anything close to that, like if they're aiming for something of that caliber, that's going to be cool because what Bryce did show us when we were talking about this game, and by the way, this is from an award-winning independent studio called Quantic Dream and in partnership with Lucasfilm Games, and it's classified as an action-adventure, multiple character branching narrative game, which is set in the High Republic era of Star Wars, which has been the recent branch of stories that they've been telling us over the last year now between books and comics and audiobooks, and also a VR game called Tales from Galaxy's Edge which I've been playing, has had a set of short story adventures on the side that kind of take you back to the High Republic era, and you experience a game set in the shoes of a character in that time period, which is pretty neat. So this will be kind of the third / maybe the second time that we see a High Republic era set video game like on screen, but this one's going to be more widely accessible because I know not everyone does VR, but very much more of a cinematic vibe because there are other games from Quantic Dream. They released 5 between 1999 and 2018 called The Nomad Soul, Fahrenheit, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and Detroit Become Human. Available on a wide array of consoles between PlayStation, Xbox, PC. Even they have one that's been released on mobile, like on iOS and Android. So lots of stuff there. And yeah, the gameplay is very interesting. It's like, how would you describe it? Just like kind of like Telltale games, like where you can hit a button when it tells you to, it's like a timed thing.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah. Or almost like DDR, Dance Dance Revolution, except instead of using like footsteps or whatever, it's about matching this, like the pattern.
Yeah, there was one fight scene. So in the fight scene that is from one of the games, you play as a guy who the fight is very cinematic. Like it's a cutscene that's interactive in a way. Yeah. And every action that you do, sometimes it gives you 2 options, and you have to be super quick about it. You have to hit either X or 0 or circle or or A or B or whatever controller you're using. You get the option of like two things. You can either like boom, kill this guy or knock that guy out, and whatever you do is going to affect the next thing that happens in the fight. And so you couldn't just you could go through the whole thing and just button mash and not know what you press, and like it'll come to some conclusion. But I think the whole idea of this game is it is kind of like RPG a little bit, but yeah, it's more like a movie kind of experience where you're not exactly free controlling a character. It's just very cinematic where you play as a character and maybe they're going to set it up like there's chapters or episodes to go through and you just kind of go through it that way. So
I was very surprised to see that that's going to be the gameplay, because to me, there's parts of the Force Unleashed games that are like that. And those are always the parts of the Force Unleashed games that I didn't like. So it's just an entire game that is the gameplay that I disliked in other games.
Right. Yeah. And I think that goes without saying that this game is 100% supposed to be story driven. So like the style of gameplay it reminds me a lot of the Telltale games where it was basically the same thing. And you could choose like your response to some things and whatever else, but I'm assuming that they're trying to make this one like a lot more vast. And the fact that it's set when it's set gives them a lot of freedom to kind of do some stuff. But the fact that it is the High Republic, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, set roughly about 200 years before the Phantom Menace takes place, the Outer Rim is still being explored. Hyperspace lanes are still being developed or prospected or whatever. And, that's kind of the era that it's set in. Being a game that's released in this new canon era, though, makes you wonder, like, if it gives you multiple decisions to make, what's the canon story? Like, if you have, if it's so story driven, what's the actual events that take place? Well,
it might also not change the important story points, because I know if it's similar to the video of the other game by the studio we watched, the options were like you can block a guy or you can shoot him. So it's kind of like in the end you're going to get to the same point, but you just get there by two different ways.
Right. Yeah. I guess. Yeah, that could be. Yeah. And putting it that way, it sounds kind of boring, but I mean, I'm sure they'll throw in some more kind of big decisions, like killing a main character or not killing a main character could completely change the course of the game. Maybe. I don't know. Like that's the thing. Like how vast this can be is completely.
We don't know. Honestly.
We don't know. Yeah. We have no idea.
Is it a pick your own adventure within like a certain set of rails, or is it just hit the buttons to see the next cutscene? Which I personally think it's the latter, but we'll see.
If it is true, if it is the latter, I really hope that they nail the graphics on this, because if I'm going to be clicking buttons to get through a game that's just story driven, that story and that cinematic should be very, very good for me to stay interested in this game. Because,
I agree entirely.
Running this podcast, I'm going to do it anyways, but like, I don't know about you, but I would like to enjoy that experience. So I don't want to have to see like, oh yeah, I have to get through this. I have to get through that.
Well, I would say silver lining, even if it's bad, is it's going to be cool to see visually actually see what it's now like at this point in the galaxy. Because we've really only got books up to this point. That and the one VR game, like you said. So there hasn't been a lot of exploration visually of what's going on. Yeah,
and we only get real fragments of spots throughout the galaxy at this point in time in this trailer. And aside from the VR game, this is really the most true to life depiction of Star Wars set during this era that we've ever seen. Because the only visual things that we've seen before in this era taking place, aside from VR, which is the graphics are a lot more dumbed down, obviously, than this. The only other depiction is in a comic book and in just our heads when we read a novel.
That's right.
Right. So my first recommendation to anyone who wants to explore the High Republic era, just pick up the Light of the Jedi book, the novel, and just read it. Because that's a great way to kind of launch into this era, get the idea for what's going on. But the biggest question I have about this trailer is we don't see the Nihil at all, which so far over the last year, all the stories that have taken place in the High Republic era, the Nihil have been the main antagonists of the story, which the Jedi had been fighting and all that. And those Voldemort-looking creature alien things are not Nihil. They're something completely different, something new that we've never seen before. So it begs the question, when in the High Republic does this take place? Is it closer to the Phantom Menace, or is it before the Light of the Jedi, when kind of those main stories kick off?
I'm basing this just on the fact of we see the Trade Federation ships, and it seems like everything, like the style of like the ships, the builds and everything, it all looks like we saw in Phantom Menace. So I think it's quite close to that point, as opposed to the novels we've had, which were, as you mentioned, over 200 years prior. Yeah,
that big Lucre Hulk Trade Federation ship shows up at one point, and you got a very Phantom Menace vibe about that scene when with the big space battle and everything like that. Yeah,
for sure. And I doubt that a business, I guess, because they're not really a planet, so like a business of the Trade Federation who are pushing for war are going to go to war against the Republic with ships that are 200 years old. Seems very unlikely.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And we do know that the High Republic era goes until about 50 years before the Phantom Menace, because that's when I think we talked about this briefly at one point a while ago. There's a manga Chinese web novel that's been published chapter by chapter called The Light of Silver Dawn, I believe it was. And that story takes place. All
Star Wars titles sound the same.
Yeah, The Vow of Silver Dawn. So it's a canon Chinese web novel written by an author under the pseudonym of His Majesty the King. And it's in collaboration between China Literature and Lucasfilm Limited. And it was announced in 2019, and the final chapters were actually recently published September 21st, 2021. So you can finally read the whole novel. If you understand Mandarin, you can do it. I know there's people on Reddit and other people out there that have been translating these, because officially it's not translated yet. I'm sure at some point it might be, but so far they've been targeting Star Wars at the Chinese audience, and this has been their sole and one and only thing that's worked so far. So, or at least that they've done. But what's interesting about it is it does take place in the High Republic, and it's only about 50 years or so before the Phantom Menace. We also know that the Disney Plus show, The Acolyte, will also take place around that same time. So the High Republic is like 200 to 50 years before the films. And this game, seeing as there's no Nihil in it, and you're saying that you don't think it's before the Light of the Jedi, all we can say is it's probably about 50 to 100 years before the Phantom Menace, which would make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So
that's honestly where I think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Something that we didn't really put any attention to, and I haven't talked to you about, is if you go to the time code 1 minute, 35 seconds, we see what looks to be an army marching towards something. We don't know what it is, but there's all these soldiers and tanks and stuff. And these, looking at the race, it's not the same race as the people playing the drums, because these guys have noses.
Oh, it's not the same race.
No, you can see these guys have a nose, and then the guys with the drums have no nose. So unless it's a race with like different physical characteristics, these might be two different armies.
Right. Yeah. You're right. And these guys have like a logo on their chest.
Yeah, they look like they're from Mass Effect.
Yeah, they kind of do, actually. Yeah, you're right. They do have and they have different eyes as well. I think. Yeah, their eyes are different. Yeah, that's interesting.
Think they're the same.
That's interesting. They could be different completely. Yeah. On the other hand, they could be just from the same planet, maybe just a different subspecies or something.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Yeah, it could be that. Like,
because I know a lot of and a lot of Zabraks look different as well. Like you got red and yellow ones, and some of them have weird horns, some of them don't. Right? Like you got a whole variety of stuff like that. Twi'leks, you got everything from Twi'leks with 4 Laiku to like 2 2. So you don't, who knows, but what I do find interesting as well is at time code 1 or 2 minutes almost exactly, the big star battle that's going on. The Lucre Hulks from the Trade Federation, you can see a little bit below them, they do have landing ships, like the ones that we see in the Phantom Menace that land, the invasion ships that land on Naboo, those brown ones. Yeah, they got 2 of them flying in the background there, as well as facing off against a fleet of these new ships that we've never seen before, which look like they could belong to that army that we saw like just now.
That's my guess.
Yeah. So whatever's going on, the Trade Federation is warring against another faction entirely new to us that we've never seen before. And if this faction isn't the same as these drummer guys who are drumming for this guy coming out of the black glue, very, very similar to Dune, it's just like, it's almost like they took that right out of that movie. But like I think they even have that in the trailer as well for Dune. But it makes me wonder who this guy is. First off, like, I don't think he's a Sith, because, and that's the one thing to remember about anything in the High Republic, is the Sith will not ever make a public appearance to the Jedi unless that Jedi is going to die and not be able to tell anyone else about it. Because the first time the Jedi encounter the Sith again in a millennia is in the Phantom Menace. That's Darth Maul versus Qui-Gon on Tatooine for the first time. They go back to the Jedi Council and say, hey, look, I think this was a Sith Lord. And they're like, oh, shoot, like, what the heck? That can't be, right?
Yeah.
So
they don't believe him because it's been a millennia.
Yeah, they don't believe him at all.
Extinct.
Yeah, yeah. So there's no way that the Sith are involved in this plot line at all. Whatever it is, as we know, it's the High Republic era. Outer Rim is still being explored a lot. So it's a possibility that the Trade Federation is kind of taking advantage of some of that and maybe trying to claim worlds or maybe resources on a planet that has newly been discovered and could be warring against entirely new factions on new planets that we've never met before. And, some terrible consequence could come out of that stuff.
That is true.
So that's interesting to think of as well. What do you think of the Jedi scenes? We get a lot of Jedi scenes
at the beginning. We do, yeah. Like
we get some Jedi sparring with each other. We get 2 Jedi facing off on a snowy planet against an army of who knows what.
I think the duel is a false positive, as in I think it's a master and apprentice training. I don't think that's Jedi actually fighting.
Yeah, I think they're just practicing too. There's something very similar about this temple to a temple that did show up in the VR experience. It has a very similar design. It might not be the exact same temple, but it just kind of reminded me of that a lot. And maybe worth noting that this could actually have some ties to Tales from a Galaxy's Edge VR. So that's kind of cool to think about.
Yeah, it's totally possible.
But what I like about the High Republic, and I know you found this as well during the comic books, especially because you get the visual depiction. But as we know from the book as well, all these Jedi have such different colored lightsabers and hilts and tunics and everything. Like, they're much more
relaxed.
I don't know. Yeah, relaxed might be one of them. I guess they're less grayscale. Like they're less boring. I don't know. I mean, when you watch the prequels, like, it has this monochromatic feel about the Jedi Order, right? It's boring. It's what's the word I'm looking for?
It's like going to church, right? Like, say 10, 15 years ago, you had to put on your best, like, nicest clothes or going to like the airport. If you're going to have a flight, you would expect it to dress up. Well, now people go in like pajamas. Yeah.
I think I'm looking for the word dogmatic. It's very like monochromatic, and the way how Palpatine puts it is the dogmatic view of the Jedi. So they all have this like unified perspective of how things are and everything. And I don't know. I guess in the High Republic, everyone's got like a very different. they've established so far that some Jedi even have relationships that they're not like personally attached to, but they're still like
physically intimate
with these people. Yeah. Which is the first I've ever heard in Star Wars of being a thing, but apparently in the High Republic, they're doing that stuff. So
apparently Dooku's first apprentice also was like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because in the trailer alone, we've got like a yellow lightsaber, a blue lightsaber, a green lightsaber.
There's a lot more colors. I don't know how they explain that, especially now that crystals are no longer something you find, but in relation to the Jedi. So it's like, does that mean and several classes or types of Jedi just stopped existing? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because purple too is now way more common, whereas originally, like, there was a whole story behind why Mace Windu had the purple lightsaber. That's because he had both a red and a blue crystal in his saber.
Yeah, I think that's an EU thing, which I guess they scrapped, and now it's like, well, anyone can have a purple lightsaber. But in Jedi Fallen Order, I think that was the first game that really canonized all these other colors. And then when The Rise of Skywalker came out, they kind of forced the yellow in our face and went, look, this is a live action depiction of a yellow lightsaber that we've only ever seen in Clone Wars and in Star Wars Rebels and stuff. So, the High Republic is really kind of modernizing that lore. This is a thing, and all these Jedi wear very different outfits and costumes and everything. And a couple of years ago, you had a really, you still have it, but you have a really good Jedi costume, like a Jedi adventure costume.
Yeah, it was stylized
and everything. Yeah,
it was stylized after the Force Unleashed Jedi. I think it was Jedi Explorer robes.
Yeah. So, and this is super cool because it looks really fantasy, but also really Star Warsy, right?
It has this cool, like, because it looks like it's almost like an Assassin's Creed version of a Jedi robe. That's what it looks like.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that kind of style has been. There's so many different styles with all these Jedi in the High Republic. And that's what I think is so cool about the Jedi during this time period is like it's all very diverse. And so it comes across very clearly in this trailer when we actually see it on a live action kind of more realistic depiction, which is awesome. It's
funny. It's almost like, I feel like what they're trying to say here is like the Jedi have become so like political and narrow-minded to like see where they were before, because it's supposed to be like you said, this is the Jedi at like the height of like, or at their prime, and then when we meet them in the prequel movies, they've really lost their way and they become too political and narrow-minded. And so I think that's like a visual representation of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and just how Anakin's tunic being black is a representation of him having like a bit of a darker edge.
It's Peter Parker did that too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no better reference than Spider-Man 3.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, that's exactly it, right? Like you watch a movie or any kind of visual artistic storytelling is going to have the visual narrative to go along with the story. And Anakin's tunic is black. He turns into Darth Vader. He's the only Jedi that has a black tunic.
Should have been a red flag.
Yeah, it shows his rebellious side and all that. Should have been a red flag, but whatever. And then I guess it's all about the visual story narrative, right? When it comes to some of this stuff, especially in a video game. So we can't really, of course, move on topics without mentioning Yoda, who shows up very prominently for a couple seconds
in the
Jedi. Yeah, in the temple, looking over Coruscant, which hasn't changed. Yoda's around in this time, like he's younger by however many years this is compared to the Phantom Menace, maybe 100 years or so.
Yeah, so that means he's still in the between like 600 and 700 something year range.
Yeah, something around there, or maybe between 700 and 800, because he's about 900 when you get to Dagobah. But But yeah, like he's a bit younger, and he's shown up a little bit in the comic books with the High Republic, very sparingly, and he's showed up in one of the VR experiences as well, when you're playing as a Jedi Padawan under the guidance of Yoda, and together with Yoda, you have to entrap like this Sith artifact in a Jedi Temple that's broken loose, and it's kind of spewing out all this dark kind of twisty vine stuff, and these little demon creatures are kind of running around, and it's kind of freaky, but it was really neat, and threats that I guess we just naturally assume, like, oh, the Sith and the Jedi, like they're just endlessly in battle with each other and all that stuff, but
which actually technically is the canon now, because as Snoke said, as light rises, so does dark to meet it. So it means it's endless.
Yeah, and in that millennia that they don't reveal themselves to the Jedi, which also includes the High Republic era, the Sith are around. They're just hiding, right? Like they're just not tearing the galaxy apart, and if they are killing Jedi, they're doing it in secret and discreetly. Yeah, so they are out there, but they're not exactly public info. And they do have this vast history to them of being existent for thousands of years. So there's a lot of dark artifacts and like all this and that. And
they I'm actually currently going through the audio. I forget it's not audio book. It's the other one, but
the audio drama.
Yeah, with like the Dooku one.
Yeah, Dooku Jedi Lost. Yeah,
that's the one. Yeah, and they're actually talking a lot about this specific thing of finding all these like Sith artifacts that are coming up, and they're finding them.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's kind of our third and final topic our third out of 4 topics. We can maybe skip the last one depending on how much time we've got. But that's the last thing I would need to bring up as far as if you're ready to move on from the Eclipse, that is.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've covered most of the main stuff here.
We've covered it pretty well. Yeah.
Trailer looks cool. We'll see where it goes. But I will say the trailers look really good for the Star Wars, the old Republic games, and then the game looked nothing like that. So, waiting to see a gameplay trailer, and we'll go from there.
Exactly. And there's one small readout I'll just read before we wrap up that subject is on StarWars.com. They say, as the first video game to be set in the High Republic era, the multimedia initiative that launched with the publishing earlier this year, Star Wars Eclipse will feature an original story and unique characters, each in their own paths, abilities, and roles to play in the tapestry of events that could alter the carefully balanced piece in the uncharted section of the Outer Rim. So that kind of confirms where the story takes place. Star Wars Eclipse will be intricately branching action-adventure game that can be experienced in multiple ways, putting the destinies of an array of playable characters in your hands. Your choices will be at the heart of the experience, as every decision can have a dramatic impact on the course of the story. Through these decisions, players will forge their own legend in the golden age of the Jedi. The Star Wars Eclipse game is currently in the early stages of development at Quantic Dream Studios in Paris, France, and in Montreal, Canada. So, lots to look forward to there. And I guess we might see this game come out in a year or two, I would imagine.
So this is very early then. I assumed with the trailer we were going to get it sometime next year, like first quarter, second quarter.
Yeah.
But it sounds like maybe late next year to the following year.
Yeah, probably. That's Then I think the next big Star Wars game is going to be Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga. That'll be the next big title.
Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga is it's like tomorrow. It's always coming, but you never actually get there.
Yeah. All right. With that, let's move on to our third topic of the day, the Bogan Collection. So, you mentioned you're finally listening to the audio drama Dooku Jedi Lost, which is amazing. And I recommend it to anyone who likes the character of Dooku and wants to read a story that takes place before the Phantom Menace.
Yep.
But
it sheds a lot of light into Dooku and how he fell from the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
And it also really, this is what I was really surprised by. It really builds his relationship with Sifo Dyas.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a huge thing. Yeah.
And that makes what happens later, as we find out in the Clone Wars, if this is a spoiler, I feel bad for you. But when we find out that Sifo Dyas was used to build the clone army, he was like betrayed and everything, that makes that betrayal like way deeper.
Yeah, like much more tragic.
That was Dooku's only friend.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very, very Sith-like to do something like that. So you mentioned that in this book, because I've also read it as well. It was just a little while ago, but there is a very clear kind of storyline that's woven into his story. As he kind of befriends, is it Sifo Dyas' master that has this obsession with Sith artifacts? Okay, yeah. So in the story, there's a character. I believe her name is it Leanne Costana or something?
Costana sounds right. They don't use her first name very often.
Lene Costana or something. Yeah. So she has this. She's a Jedi who has an obsession about Sith artifacts and having to collect these Sith artifacts to study them in hopes that they give insight for the Jedi to take as guidance in the event that the Sith do in fact return to the galaxy, and that they'll have a better chance of fighting the Sith again once they come back. So that's her belief. But the other Jedi don't believe her, and they think she's nuts because they think the Sith are gone. They're extinct. They've been away for 1,000 years. If you think about 1,000 years, like right now, 1,000 years ago, that was a long time ago, man. Like the world was like a very different place 1,000 years ago.
Like here been like the medieval dark ages.
Yeah, even is that when we're, exactly. Like pretty much right in the square of medieval times, I guess.
Yeah, because like we started like rebuilding technology like closer to where we are now around like the 1400 era, right? Yeah. So everything prior to that was super, super basic.
Right. And, I guess you can look up timemaps.com world 1000 BCE to see kind of, what was going on around different parts of the world and stuff like that. But, it's a very different time, of course, on our planet. And you can just imagine the Star Wars galaxy as well, which is also a very different place in respects. So 1,000 years does a long time. And the Jedi being all kind of like, all posh and everything, they think like, there's no way they're going to come back. And yet this character, Sifo Dyas' master, Costana, she keeps having these visions that like we need to prepare for this inevitable day that the Sith return, and we have to know how to defeat them again. So she goes around collecting all these artifacts and bringing them back to the Jedi Temple. And there's something that comes out of this, which is referenced a few times through Star Wars. It's called the Bogan Collection. And Bogan is a word for evil, very similar to how Ashla is the word for good. And as we know from Star Wars Rebels, the Bendu is known as the middle, the center point. So the Bogan Collection...
Funny is that actually is a point in the Dooku Jedi Lost story where it's actually those three characters specifically, Costana, Dooku, and Sifo Dyas. They all have to like link arms to like strengthen themselves in the Force, and they just start chanting the light, the dark, and like the middle or whatever, which is interesting. I wasn't expecting, and I think they just call it the balance. So it's light, dark, and balance. But like it's interesting that they specifically call out balance. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So the Bogan Collection is also known as the Archive of Forbidden Artifacts. It's a hidden vault of forbidden artifacts associated with the dark side of the Force within the archives of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Despite being accessible to only specific members of the Jedi Order, several Jedi, including Claes Terradine, who's a Jedi from the High Republic era, Lene Costana, known as Sifo Dyas' master, Eula Braylon, who's I believe a Jedi. She during the Jedi. No, she shows up in Dooku Jedi Lost as well.
Yeah, I recognize her name.
Dooku himself and Sifo Dyas, of course, broke. Those two characters at the very end break into the vault at one point.
Yeah, they find it and they didn't know it was there. But
they didn't know it was there, yeah.
Yeah, Dooku realizes that the room has an artificial wall, and so they kind of sneak in to see what it is, and they find it.
Yeah, so based on those names, that's like very few people. That's like during Dooku Jedi Lost, there's that's 2 Jedi out of all of them that have access, and then during the High Republic, there's only been confirmed as 1 or 2 in the High Republic as well. So there's very few Jedi at a time that really have access to that stuff.
Access, that's the key word, though. Others are aware of it. Yoda is very aware of its existence and knows where it is and how to get there and how to get in.
And he doesn't even touch that stuff. Yoda just I'm sure Yoda could have access if he wanted to, but he just doesn't want to even touch that side of that. He doesn't want to even go near that business. After the fall of the Republic, Darth Sidious obviously inherits this Bogan Collection when he becomes Emperor, and gets all these evil artifacts again, and some of them even pop up later in some of the comics and stories and stuff. But there was a little readout on Insider number 199, which is actually one of the more recent-ish issues. And I just had to copy it down. I modified the text just a little bit to speed it up a bit. But I just had to read it because it was kind of interesting. So once upon a time, Jedi Knights and Council members had some strong differing opinions about how much, if any, attention should be paid to the history of the Sith. While some Jedi Masters sought to gain knowledge from Sith artifacts, others on the Council deemed such quests to be dangerous or a waste of time. One Council member, Eula Braylon, a seeker who searched the galaxy for Force-sensitive children to be trained at the Jedi Temple, questioned her fellow Jedi, Lene Costana's interest in learning more about Sith artifacts. Lene Costana was a Jedi who rose to the rank of Jedi Master. At some stage during her life, she became fascinated with locating and analyzing Sith artifacts in order to prepare for the inevitable return of the Sith Order. Eula accused her of being obsessed with the Sith, but Costana argued that reducing the Sith to a footnote in history might play directly into their hands, which eventually, of course, it did. Until Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan encountered the mystery assailant on Tatooine, it was widely believed that the long-dormant Sith no longer existed. And despite testament to the contrary, Council members including Ki-Adi-Mundi and Mace Windu initially refused to believe the Sith had returned. Yoda, however, was more cautious. Despite previously believing the Sith to be in the past, he admitted the possibility of a return in his acknowledgement that the dark side was hard to see. As Grand Master of the Jedi Order, his opinion held great weight, and the Council set about the task of discovering the identity of the mysterious foe. Yet his acknowledgement of the threat did not result in the Jedi preparing for the eventual return of the enemy. Sith objects in the archive of forbidden artifacts remained hidden even from other Jedi, and the Council kept their focus on the present in hope that the evils of the past would just stay there. So kind of an ignorant thing on their part, and eventually led to their downfall. But Archive of Forbidden Artifacts has some interesting stuff. It's been a while since I read that, but do you remember any specific artifacts that popped up in the story that they encountered?
Not off the top of my head. I know when they first break in, I'm not sure what causes it, but it makes Dooku see visions. Right. And then he lashes out and he almost attacks. Oh, he sees some sort of vision of a monster, and then it makes him think that Costana is secretly a Sith herself, and then he fights her.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, it's coming back to me now. I think at one point there was some artifact. And by the way, this is kind of an interesting fact as well. To get into this vault, there's a unique Force power. Well, you have to be very masterful with the Force to even get in here, because the way that they've locked the door is you have to move sand with the Force up. It's a Force power called shifting sand. And it's, I guess, sand in a door that you have to manipulate the small particles with the Force just to open it, which is kind of fascinating. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, they allude to in the book. They allude to that that Dooku was the only one that Sifo knew who would be able to do it.
Yeah. So there's also something else that's kind of interesting. There's several artifacts in this room, but Dooku's attention is captured by a piece of metal, and he soon starts to hear this growl of a tirataka, which is a creature. According to legend, it's a creature that was native to the planet of Sereno, which is his homeworld, and it's basically a dragon, like it's a reptilian dragon. And Tirataka is very like the name, the way that they pronounce it in the story. You can totally tell that his name, Darth Tyrannus, is based on this creature's name, like 100% based on that creature's name. So, or maybe I'm saying it wrong. It's Tirataka, I think.
That actually makes sense, because the only thing we really had as fans to connect to that name was Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So this artifact like almost curses him for the rest of the story, because I don't know, maybe I hope I'm not spoiling for you a little bit, but he hears this growl occasionally as the story goes on, and that's just my assumption. It's never been confirmed that that's what it is, but I imagine that creature is the reason why he calls himself Darth Tyrannus later on.
That does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So there's a couple of interesting artifacts that have showed up in the Star Wars stories so far. So we'll quickly kind of go over those items. There was a couple things: Sith scrolls, lightsabers, helmets, and more.
Holocrons.
Holocrons. Some of these things have shown up in the High Republic era. And let's see, I'm just kind of scanning through a bunch of stuff. So at one point we read a book called it was a High Republic book. I think it was called Into the Dark, and it was the one that featured Reith Silas. And they boarded
so you find that space station, right?
Yeah, the Amaxine space station. Yeah, and they found these big statues.
Yeah, that was the book that I thought had the most potential and just dropped the ball.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So they believe they found these big statues, like a bunch of Jedi that go aboard this thing, believing that this set of arcane statues were responsible for a disturbance in the force that they felt on the station. They bring those statues back to the Jedi Temple and store them in the Bogan Collection. Meanwhile, these statues actually were Sith statue artifacts. They were actually keeping a very particular plant species dormant. And when they removed those statues from the station and brought them back to the Bogan Collection on Coruscant, these things come to life again. And they're an antagonist in the High Republic stories we've been reading called the Drengir. And it was because of that event that they kind of come back to the galaxy again. And it was actually the Sith that stopped them initially with these statues. They did something in the Force, in the dark side of the Force, and they felt the Force emanating from these objects, and they thought, these are bad. But
but I think then we learned later was that the Sith created this plant species, and then they were actually overpowered by their own creation, and they had to erect those statues just to survive themselves.
Yeah, it was something like that for sure.
Like a Dr. Frankenstein sort of situation.
Yeah, like their own creation turned against them, so they ended up having to stop them themselves, kind of thing. And and the Drengir are these carnivorous plant-like monsters, which I don't know. I thought they were going to be way scarier, but they end up talking and it was becoming less cool.
Agreed. They were just like these mindless monsters. Like
it would have been way better.
Monsters. Agreed.
Yeah.
But one other thing to note is we do not see the Drengir in that trailer. So another reason to think it's in a different era.
It's true. Yeah. Everything what we know from the High Republic so far, with the Drengir and the Nihil being the two antagonist things, not a single clue as to where those things are in this cinematic trailer for Eclipse. So yeah, you're right. I think it could probably be
way after the tail end, I think.
Tail end of the High Republic. Yeah, I would imagine so. So what else is in this archive? Of course, we mentioned the piece of metal that Dooku becomes fixated with, and I think at some point, believing he's in genuine danger, Dooku uses the Force to protect himself from this growl that he hears, destroys a number of objects and relics in doing so, and also injures Sifo Dyas. And the two were unaware of how powerful. Yeah, that's when they break in together, and they're completely unaware of how powerful the items within this collection can be, and they immediately learn why they're kind of hidden away from prying eyes. There's a very particular object that shows up in the Darth Vader comic book series, which I forget which series this is. I think it might be it might have been the Dark Lord of the Sith ones. But Sidious gifts a mask to Vader at one point, which is the mask of a Sith Lord known as Darth Momin, which is a Sith Lord that existed a long time ago.
Darth
and he
Mormon?
wore the Momin, Momin. Very funny. Darth Momin wore an ominous mask with glowing red eyes. And Momin he's like this creepy guy. Like he was like this very disturbed child when he was growing up. And he was known for creating sadistic sculptures that landed him in prison, like as like a younger man kind of thing. And sometime after his imprisonment, he was approached by a woman named Darth Shah, who becomes his master. And eventually he betrays her, of course, as the Sith do, and continued to learn the ways of the dark side. And after his time, the Jedi recovered his mask and put it in the Bogan Collection, only to be gifted to Darth Vader centuries later, who realized that the mask was quite compelling and it could actually like call to people and possess those who actually donned the mask and put it on them. Mm-hmm. And it's like this whole kind of side storyline that happens. The Vader comics are so good, but yeah, the moment storyline is kind of fleshed out a little bit more as that kind of plot goes on. And it was kind of neat. I mean, seeing like the Sith of old kind of thing. I don't necessarily know exactly when he takes place, but I think it's kind of in that rule of two, Darth Bane, like post Darth Bane era.
That's specifically who I was going to bring up, actually, if there's any relics that pertain to Darth Bane.
Well, we do know from that Clone Wars episode that Yoda goes to Morband and there's the Sith tomb. Spirit of Darth Bane and his tomb. Yeah. And that I think is the only thing that kind
There's
of
no
has
relics then.
No, I don't think anything directly related to him. I don't think they have any relics, but that's all the information I have right now about the Bogan Collection.
There's the sheet, the tanned leather hide of Darth Bane's face tattoos.
Yeah. Yeah, but so that's the Bogan Collection, and I don't know. I think it's really, really neat that the Jedi have this collection of like, it's almost like going to the basement of a Catholic church and finding all these like, demonic like things that they've just stashed down there, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing about this is we know from the unproduced Clone Wars episodes that Dave talked about at one of the celebrations, and it's also been canonized in the Star Wars Tarkin book, that the Jedi Temple is actually built on top of a ruined Sith temple that was there before the Jedi Temple ever was. So like the entire story has this paradigm shift. It's like, oh wow, like the foundation of the Jedi is built atop darkness. Like it's just this crazy kind of
it's an interesting concept.
Like it's a crazy concept. Yeah.
Because I think, I'm not sure if it was he who explained the idea or for somewhere else, but I think it was their hopes were by building it there, they would purify the grounds.
Right. Yeah. And in actual fact, like it might in fact do that exact thing because, but the fact that when the Sith kind of rise again, the influence is that much stronger. And Yoda sitting on his chair going like, it's so hard to see things right now. Like the darkness is growing around us and blinding us literally, like in the Force, like we can't see anything. I'm sure if they just took a hike to like Tython or something for a day, maybe they might have a better, meditation experience. But I think it's just fascinating that the Jedi have the audacity to kind of think like, let's just cover it up. It's like taking this bad graffiti and then spray painting a different color on top, like white or something like that. And then the rain falls and time goes by and that layer just wears away and you start to see those inner colors, right? Like the things that were before. Yeah. And it starts to really kind of affect what you see on top. And it's very similar to how the story of the downfall of the Jedi kind of works out is like their ambition and their whole narrative kind of just bites them in the butt at the end of the day. Cause they thought that the Sith would never return. They turned a blind eye. They didn't think they would come back and they didn't do anything to prepare for it. And then boom, they said dead.
That's right. It's true.
Yeah, it's a crazy story.
You need to be ever vigilant against like tyranny and stuff like that, right? So it's like let your guard down. That's what it's there lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. It took the Sith 1,000 years, but they did it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But
they can only hold on to it for about 20. So,
right, and and the Sith Lord, or this Jedi Master that Sifo Dyas's master, who's got this obsession with these things. She might be, she might not be crazy after all. And I don't think the answer to defeating the Sith is in these Sith relics, but she's not wrong about the fact that they could come back, and we can't be ignorant to that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a cool story, and I don't know, the Bogan Collection is just nothing that ever gets mentioned in the films, and so seeing that it's popping up again in the High Republic and all that, and recent stories like Dooku Jedi Lost and all that, it's definitely something worth talking about and keeping in mind as we go forward. All these Sith artifacts that the Jedi find, like they might end up in the Bogan Collection. So just fun facts.
I think it's something that's going to start showing up more and more. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely feels that way. But man, we're running short on time. So I don't know if we can always talk about this Galactic Star Cruiser stuff another time. But is there anything last minute you wanted to bring up before we send it off in a light speed?
Just, I will say I'm still very surprised that the trailer was so high quality and that the game is 2 years away. I felt like it was just around the corner. Yeah, so that comes as a surprise to me.
I know when it comes to cinematic trailers, it can be very misleading, because I remember seeing the first cinematic trailer for the Old Republic and then playing the game.
Yeah.
I'm not a big MMO guy. Like, I don't really have a whole lot of patience for it, but it's, and some people just absolutely love that game, and it's looks like visually nothing like the cinematic trailers.
Yeah, it's like a cartoon of the trailer.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just holding out hope that being such a realistic, looking at their other games, which have a very impressive graphics, quality to it. Like, I really hope they really push the bar with this game.
I think that's not the hope.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? Like, it might not look exactly like the cinematic trailer, but if it gets close, I'm going to be happy.
If the gameplay is as simple as we've been led to believe, then to me the graphics seem more plausible. Especially when I feel like we're seeing games come out that are that level of graphics now anyway, so it wouldn't be that hard to believe.
Right. Yeah, and if this game really is being designed for next gen consoles, it'll be this company's first for the next gen consoles. So we could really be seeing something as them taking advantage of this new wave of technology and being like, oh wow, we can make this thing 4K and all this and that, and it's probably going to look absolutely stunning. So
yeah, I gotta say, I'm excited to play this game in 4K on my Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
That's right.
All right, man. Well, I guess we'll catch you in the next episode.
Sounds good. See you there.
And thank you guys at home for doing the favors to us by sharing the show with a friend. It really helps us out a lot. And, we do see the listener count growing very slowly, but we really do appreciate the help in sharing this show with your friends, letting them know Star Wars Escape Pod is a podcast for them, and something just to entertain them on the drive to work or whatever. If they want to discover a little more about Star Wars and a little more in-depth experience trying to break down all these trailers and speculating about stuff in the future and reviewing stuff that comes out and all that stuff. I mean, it's great. And, we love talking about Star Wars, and we'd love to start making episodes geared for slightly newer fans in the future, doing episodes that are kind of more dumbed down a little bit, so to speak, more kind of entry level stuff. I know we've had our What Happened episodes, which have been great ways to review Star Wars characters in a full arc length narrative. And we'd love to keep doing stuff like that, but more just kind of basic things about the movies and the stuff, the mainstream stuff that maybe more common viewers might take a look at. So if you guys have any recommendations to subjects and topics that maybe we can refer to you from a previous episode we've done, or even something we haven't done yet that you want us to cover, shoot us an email, Twitter, or tweet, or join the Discord, send us a message there. Lots of options. May the Force be with you guys, and we'll see you in the next episode.